This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak with Jenna Mack about working with Charlie Rose, long-form video content, and why the most interesting things happen in the grey area. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Jenna Mack. Jenna Mack is the creator and host of the interview program In the Grey. She is an experienced producer who is responsible for cultural segments on Charlie Rose, featuring renowned actors, writers, architects, and designers. And during that formative time at the acclaimed PBS broadcast, Mack's visions for In the Grey took shape. And it's my great pleasure to have her join us today. So welcome, Jenna.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Well, actually, just now, in fact, it's going to be a little bit boring. I'm doing a lot of laundry because I just finished my one of my episodes. We locked picture late Friday at I think it's 12:30 in the morning. So I'm now getting back to my regular life, which is kind of picking up some of the pieces that I've let fall behind: emails, mail, laundry, etc.
So when you're in that mode of editing, everything basically goes on hold until you finish it.
It is like a dark cave. You don't see the light of day. I don't speak to people. It's kind of the last push to really finish something. You put all the final touches on it. So it's an exciting moment, but it's also that time of feeling like you're back at university and kind of handing in your final exam. Yeah. And you're hoping everything was, said correctly and everything spelled correctly. So it's an intense time, but it's thrilling.
And where did it all begin for you? I mean, how did you get into this world of interviewing people and kind of finding really interesting things that are happening in the world and with individuals?
That's a good question. It was really an intuitive process. I was lucky, very, very lucky, to have the fortune of working for Charlie Rose on his show. And it was such a boutique experience that I got a really hands-on view of how kind of the magic trick is put together. I got to kind of see behind the curtain. And it was really kind of in that time that I just thought, there's such a value that media has in connecting people. And when I left his show, it took some time to kind of formulate what the idea was really going to be about. But I knew that I would have a show one day. I didn't have a clear idea of what it would be about and what the purpose would be. But I was very aware that I didn't want to add noise to already a very noisy landscape. And so just kind of as some time went by, a few months, and figuring out what I wanted to do, I kept coming back to this idea that life is in the gray. It's not black or white, that life is complicated and it's nuanced. And I know that for myself, I've done a great disservice when I see myself in very strict categories. And certainly I do a disservice to other people when I see them in very confined ways, and that there's much more that really connects us than divides us, which sounds so cliche, we hear it, but to really live that, I think is a path that we need to explore more. So that's really kind of how the idea came about. And to be perfectly honest, when I kind of look back on my life and what has interested me, I've always loved talking to people. I've always loved wanting to know where they come from, what their stories have been, how those stories have shaped them from all walks of life, from, different countries, different belief systems, et cetera. So it's kind of been a culmination of a lifelong journey that I'm realizing only kind of now has made a lot of sense for me and who I am.
And as you were you mentioned you're kind of learning your craft about this style of filmmaking, the style of interviews with Charlie Mack. I'm imagining that's a pretty competitive show to be able to get involved in as well. So how did someone that comes from with an art history background like yourself, Duke,
right?
How did you end up getting to work on that show with Charlie?
Well, it's kind of a longer story, but I will say right off the bat that Charlie really does have a passion for helping people connect to their own passions. And most people might be surprised that the people who work with him, his producers, some of them don't come from a background in television. So in my case, I wasn't unusual in that sense. He really does find people who he believes in and have something to add. So that first. Now, second to that is Charlie was married to my mother's sister years and years and years ago. And so even though I didn't know him on a personal level, my parents know him. He and I were just kind of sitting at a dinner one night. I was visiting from London. I lived in the UK for a bit. And I had just decided to move back to New York. Literally, I got off the plane, I landed in JFK, had a couple hours to kind of change, get ready for this event that I was going to. And I had this like epiphany moment that I was going to move back to the States, which I never thought I would do. And that night, Charlie Rose serendipitously was my dinner partner, and he offered me a job. I basically couldn't refuse. And so that's how it happened.
So I'm imagining, you said a lot of the people that worked on that show, they don't come from the traditional, media studies kind of background. And that what you kind of talk about now, which is in the grey. So it seems like a lot of TV, especially now, goes for the extremes. So it'll bring on two guests, and they will go to the opposite ends of that place. And obviously, I can imagine that makes for quite interesting television because there's a lot of fireworks kind of going on there. But I sense that that's not where you are at. It's not what you want to have in terms of the kind of television, the kind of segments that you create.
That's right. I mean, that's I think that's very interesting, to have people who are coming from very polarizing belief systems. Obviously, that creates drama just by nature. And I understand that there is a value in that. But this really is about peeling back those layers. So it's not just, why do you believe, A and someone else believes B? It's it's not just that you believe A and someone else believes B. It's really about why do you believe that, and what really is the commonality between the two. I really don't believe in just adding to the noise, which is what we're surrounded by all the time. And when we stay on that surface level, which is what it is, I think we just lose our humanity. And so really trying to recognize that nothing is black or white, everything is gray, and getting to that heart of where we can connect is really what I'm interested in. It's and I think it's really, when you take kind of the pulse of people, it's really what they're interested in. But sometimes I think it's just hard to find that opening to connect in a different way.
I've always wanted to go and buy a T-shirt that when you go to, there's maybe demonstrations happening or there's someone campaigning against it. I've always wanted to buy a T-shirt that just says, I think you'll find it's a little bit more complicated than that. And then just stand next to people with banners. I think you'll find it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing too, is that we all know it.
Yeah.
But I think, and we all live it. If you have a pulse, you understand that things are not always as you want them to be. Life doesn't happen as you prescribe it. So it's interesting that we sometimes are so fearful to see things in complicated or complex ways. We want it to be simple. We want to put something in a certain box and something else in a different box and see it in very clean and finite terms. And that's just not the reality.
Where do you go to find those stories? I mean, I've watched some of the pieces that you've done, and it's it's an interesting kind of mix. It's definitely not in the usual kind of place where people would go for stories. So where do you go to find that inspiration, to find those stories that you want to be able to then go and tell and bring to a wider audience?
Well, in some ways, kind of off the bat, I try to think of topics that have kind of innately in it a contradictory notion. So my producer said, it was actually kind of an interesting idea. We didn't follow up with it, but it was like a vegetarian who's a hunter type of a thing. Like already within that kind of label is a contradiction. So that's kind of where I start to think about things. But really, James, is just kind of life around you. There are, topics that we all deal with as human beings. The last episode that I just wrapped last week that I was telling you about is about transgender. So, transgender as an issue or as a topic isn't something that I personally deal with, but as a person who has a gender, it brings up questions and ideas that I think is valuable for all of us to think about. And how are we really defining people? And where does that definition come from? So the ideas of what does masculine really mean? What does feminine really mean? And just we actually focused on trans males because you don't really see them out in kind of mass media or entertainment. And, just really listening to their stories and hearing about what really defines them and how they really were willing to redefine themselves to be true to who they are. It was fascinating. And you can't help but kind of take that on in your own life and see for yourself, I don't think this is accurate anymore. I don't think we should have such clear defined roles. So, and realizing also there's some things that are also true. So anyway, that's kind of where the ideas come from, but it kind of blossoms when you speak to other people and you kind of do some pre-interviews and you realize, I think we're on something really interesting here.
Once you then can create that piece and do those interviews and finish your time in the edit suite, how do you then get that to the attention of other people? So this is a story you should know about. How does that part, the distribution and the marketing part, work?
Well, that's the trick. So that's kind of the field that I'm going to be really stepping into now in a very kind of robust way. So far, it's really just been in development, and I've had some meetings here and there, but it's really kind of building a social media platform, which I'm just kind of dipping my toe into now. My focus has really been on creating content that really has value, and that takes time, and it takes, it takes kind of a leap of faith in many ways, and it takes a really great team to surround yourself with. So I feel very lucky with the people that I work with. And it's allowing the vision to continuously grow and change and evolve. So now that I feel like we're in a really good place, it's like I've kind of picked the paint color, so to speak. And now it really is going to be, finding a platform, finding distribution, and hopefully trying to be creative in that way as well.
Do you have a sense of where that distribution is going to be at this point? Because I think about, for example, YouTube. A number of my friends are kind of YouTube stars, and that platform works really well for certain types of content. A lot of the kind of the how-tos. There's a gentleman actually we're talking about New York, Casey. Whose name I've now forgotten, who does all the interesting stuff with drones and that kind of thing. Is kind of interesting because it's a bit unexpected. But for the kind of deeper, longer form content that you do you feel that is that the direction of it? Does it need to be more in the traditional broadcasters?
Well, it's such a changing landscape, and I really believe that it's going to, and I think it already is starting along this path. It's really going to be a convergence of the two. There really isn't going to be one versus the other. And in a lot of the research that I've done, because certainly you want to make sure that what you're creating will have an audience and can find a place. Especially younger generations, they really are drawn to content that they feel reflects who they are, so that they have a sense of community, especially in a world that we're living in now where community is not necessarily geographically where you are. So the content that people are drawn to are kind of like the humorous things, like the kitten playing with the ball of string type stuff, which has a value, and also more kind of in-depth content where people feel connected to it and they can see themselves reflected in that content. So I'm the content I'm producing is more on the latter side, but those two are not exclusive to each other, which I find fascinating. They see it really on a spectrum. So I think there really is a place for it, and I think there's a misnomer or misperception that it has to be short. It has to be bite-sized content for it to be consumed. That really isn't the case. It really has to be great content for it to be consumed. Now that's subjective, but certainly, the different shows that are on Netflix and HBO and CNN. Those are all long form content, and they have an audience, and they have a loyal audience. So there's a place for it for sure. It's just a matter of sticking to the vision, I think, and believing in what you're trying to create.
I suppose those things, as you say, they can exist simultaneously, where you'll have different short style content, and then I'm thinking in terms of the written word, there's things like Medium posts, or there's bloggers who do really, really like huge posts, and they're kind of known for that. And I know that in the world of video and online video, that seems to be what the platforms actually want, because they obviously, the longer that someone could be on that platform, if it is longer form content, the more ads that they can show them
exactly.
as well.
That's exactly true. And the more kind of a loyal audience you're going to build. So, it's interesting. I've been thinking about this. We've certainly in the kind of the world of technology that we're living in, and certainly with automation coming at a faster and faster rate, we're making ourselves so efficient, but for what? To use that time then for what? And so I really do believe that it should take time to really understand someone else's story, or to read a great book, or a fascinating article that looks at different angles. That takes time, and it's a value. And so I constantly am questioning for myself, what am I trying to make myself efficient for? Right now it seems just to be busier, but that's not very fulfilling.
And what held you back from, you were kind of doing Charlie Rose and other things as well, but what was the thing that was kind of holding you back from starting on this vision that is now in the grey? Was there something that just was pulling you back from actually just kind of jumping on this idea?
No, it really wasn't, other than just wanting to have a very clear idea of what it was before and that was actually, looking back on it in some ways, maybe prevented me, because I was maybe too careful. And I've come to learn that the creative process really has a rhythm of its own, and you can't control it. And I think maybe I was trying to do that in some ways in the beginning, but also it's very personal. This show in the gray really is what I believe. And so in some ways it was almost like my own therapy. You're putting yourself out there, which in itself is a daunting kind of experience. And you are, you're showing other people, and you're basing something around a personal belief. And so it was really, for me, just getting clear on what that was and where I was with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And in this journey that you've had, you're still kind of going through now with this new show as well. Can you tell maybe about a time when you worked on something, maybe worked on a piece or worked on a particular project, you gave it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it just didn't work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took from that experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, there are almost so many examples. Otherwise, I would be still doing whatever that was, right? So, I think it's just, I really see things as kind of a refining, like a continuous refining of where I feel I should be and what I feel I should be doing. And right now, what I'm doing is really the culmination of that. But, I kind of think I tried a lot of different things when I was younger, in my 20s. When I graduated from college, from university, I traveled. I went directly to Italy, and really didn't have a reason other than I wanted to experience something other than what I felt I knew so well at the time, which was living in the U.S. and, going to school here, et cetera. I was an art history major, which I think you mentioned earlier. So in that sense, the aesthetic kind of brought me to Europe in a natural way, but I just really wanted to experience something different, and certainly learning a different language, and learning to express yourself in a new way was challenging and thrilling at the same time, because you really start to kind of, again, peel back the layers of what you believe, when you're living in a different culture, and certainly as a kind of a new budding adult, you start to kind of pick and choose. I really like this about this culture. This is really interesting, or I don't really think I need this from where I come from anymore. It's just kind of broadening your awareness with the world around you. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, I guess, but I tried a lot of different things, and certainly when I moved to Italy, I thought I lived there forever, and I clearly haven't done that. So I don't know if that's a failure or what I learned from that, other than you just have to kind of keep moving and discovering and finding yourself.
It's almost a little bit. It sounds like the journey you've had is a little bit like those maybe those Michelangelo sculpture or those Henry Moore sculptures where it starts off just as a big block of stone,
and the soul is inside.
Yeah, you keep knocking away everything that doesn't look like the thing that you want until eventually you end up with something.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And in this journey, can you talk about maybe a key insight or a light bulb or an aha moment in your life, in your own creative journey?
I really think, and I touched on this a little earlier, it wasn't kind of like a light bulb in terms of like a new awareness of myself or some kind of, deep understanding. It was when I moved back to New York. I really never thought I'd move back to the States, and I really couldn't tell you why. It was just a feeling that I had. And I was very, very happy living in Europe, and I was in London at the time. And I flew back to New York for something. I can't remember exactly why. And I had this light bulb moment that I was going to move back to the States. And I think when I would tell people, especially my family, they didn't really believe me. Like, I don't think they didn't really hear me. And I said, no, I'm really moving. And then again, just as kind of life can happen when you're open to it, I was offered a job. And it just worked out, it just really worked out kind of seamlessly. So yeah, I'm grateful that I was open to take that opportunity, because I was so not thinking in that direction.
How in a city like New York, I'm always intrigued. I mean, I haven't lived in New York. I've lived in the Bay Area and in London and other kind of cities. But I'm always, whenever I go to New York, it always strikes me as it's obviously very fast paced. I like it for that, because it has its own kind of energy and a kind of certain energy. But it also kind of reminds me a little bit in the terms of the social media thing, where there's lots of like quick hits, quick little things, and it's difficult to get that longer form kind of side of things. So in a city when all this stuff's going on, how are you able to kind of pull yourself away from it in order to have those times where you need to do kind of deeper work that isn't just a hustle and bustle?
That's a great question. And I think when I first moved back to New York, the lucky thing is that I had a job to go to that was very much a part of that hustle and bustle. And we worked very, very hard. But when I left that, I felt so lost. And New York, to your point, is great if you have an idea. If you want to build something, New York is one of the best places to be. And when you don't have that idea or you're trying to figure it out, it can be sometimes the loneliest. And, to your previous question of, was I holding myself back or what prevented me? I think it was also just getting used to the energy here. There is an energy, wherever you are, there's an energy, and tapping into it to your benefit. I had to kind of adjust myself. I kind of spent 8-10 years of my 20s into my early 30s in Europe, which has a very different sensibility. And I felt very in tune with that. And when I came here, it was definitely an adjustment. And there's a transactional energy that's here, which can be really useful. And sometimes it can be a bit off-putting.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a balance that you create. But it took me time. For sure. It
was funny. I was talking to a keynote speaker the other day, a friend of mine who has lived in New York for a number of years and has recently moved to Miami. And they said the reasons he moved to Miami was because he said when he's on the road all the time, he always felt that when he came off the road, he kind of wanted to just like chill, really,
yeah.
And he said New York is amazing for lots of things, but the idea of chilling in it is a difficult concept. So that was actually one of the reasons he had to move. He said his life on the road is so full on. He needed that other place. And I guess it's just whatever works for you creatively as an individual is kind of finding those places for you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also when I first moved to New York, I didn't realize at the time, but my apartment was right across the street from a nightclub. So I think that was also part of the difficulty that I had to adjust to. But yeah.
And you were talking about being in the edit suites kind of earlier and all that side, so you're dealing with a lot of technology there as well. But do you have any online resources or tools or mobile apps that you find really useful for the creative work that you do? Actually,
a producer that I was working with turned me on to this. there's an app and it's also a website called Quora. Oh, yeah. Quora. Are you aware of it?
Yeah, it's great. It's been around for a while, and it's kind of one of those things where it kind of had a bit of a peak at first, and then kind of went away. But I still use it quite a lot because it's a great resource.
It really is, and I think there's just kind of an integrity built into the people who are on the platform who are asking questions and answering questions. I'm fascinated by the honesty that people have. And sometimes the complex questions, and sometimes the questions that you really want to ask, but maybe you're embarrassed to ask. Somehow it all happens there. Yeah. And so I find myself kind of going on there, a couple times a week, just kind of checking in and seeing what the questions are. And certainly the answers are fascinating.
And if you could recommend just one record, one album, and one book to our listeners, what would they be?
Oh, album. Oh, my goodness. Do we listen to albums anymore? I don't know.
I don't know. Playlists. The more and more I ask people this question, they say, oh, well, there's this playlist on Spotify I listen to.
Oh, right. Yes. Well, I'm not on Spotify, but I do have my own playlist, which is usually like a gym playlist, like Jenna's Gym or Jenna's Run. But books, I definitely love to read. Books. Let me think. Well, there's a book called, I don't know if you know of it, Sex at Dawn, that came out a few years ago, that I read, which is fascinating. And it's written by two anthropologists, if I remember correctly. It basically is about monogamy, and is monogamy a natural state for human beings? And they go through evolution and they compare humans to the closest ancestor, bonobos, not chimps. Anyway, it's just fascinating to kind of look at relationships and how humans have developed in our relationships from a different perspective. It was a perspective that I had never considered. So that's fascinating. I think it got a lot of controversy at the time, but that's interesting. We'll
put that link here as well. So if anyone's interested in monogamy and sex at dawn, you can check that out. Fun fact, one of my previous guests the other day is she was on, and she has a great new book out, which is talking about having controversial titles. Which her book is Why Creativity is Like Sex. And so it's a little bit of a plug-in, so if people check out the link as well. So if people go to jamestaylor.me and just look for Jenna Mack, you're going to get all the links that we're talking about today as well. Kind of final question here for you, Jenna. Let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you've got all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but you know no one knows you. You have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
Well, I really think I would just start I would certainly be doing what I'm doing now. There's no doubt about that. And I just put one foot in front of the other. That's how I started. And I don't really know any other way, especially with a creative endeavor. There's no other way to start. You just have to put one foot in front of the other. You have the idea and you have to let it grow and take on its own journey. You can never know what it really can be until you start that process.
Well, Jenna, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. And what's the best way for people to kind of learn about the show, find out more about the show, and also, maybe connect with you as well?
The best way is the website, which is In the Gray. It's INTHEGREY.com. It's still somewhat in development, but there's a contact page there. You can email me from that and see some of the other work that I've done.
And I love it's actually a beautiful site already. I mean, it's very minimalist just now, but I love the aesthetic on it. People should just go and check it just for the aesthetic. I think it's beautiful. And some of the videos I was watching a little bit earlier, there was one about the gentleman that became a farmer. As well, which is a really interesting kind of, and it's beautifully shot as would be expected. So we'll put that link. So inthegray.com, people can go and check that out. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm really looking forward to kind of catching more of these episodes as they start to kind of come out and we start to see them on whatever platform they end up coming out on as well. But thank you so much for joining us today.
James, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.